Hello, welcome to another edition of Prove All Things. I want to thank everybody who's joining us today, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or X, or on the CGI Digital Network app. We thank you for joining us. And for everyone else watching this later, we thank you for joining us as well. I'm joined with co-host Mike James. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, Jeff, doing well. Good to see you. We're in July in California, so getting a little hotter here. I don't like it, but I got to deal with it.
Mhm. Yeah, just got back from summer camp this past Sabbath. We actually started summer camp, the Searchlight, the Spotlight summer camp that we have here. We had kids from Texas, Tennessee, uh, South Carolina, I don't know, North Carolina, Georgia, all coming from different places to summer camp here, and it was put on by Church of God International, the Independent Church of God in Atlanta, and also the Christian Ambassador. So three groups come together. We have this summer camp. We had about 40 kids, and it was great. It was a wonderful time we had. Uh, it felt longer to me because the stuff I was doing and all the kids and all the fun we had, but we had a lot of fun. We did a lot of good things for the kids during that summer camp, and we're going to definitely do it again next year and try to make it bigger. We started out small because we want to see if we could get it done, and we were able to do it. So we will be able to grow it in future years to include more children. So it was a very, very fun time.
Great. Glad to hear that went well, and we're planning on doing it again next year. And let's
Yeah.
continue to get the word out about that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just working together as like what it was, working together with these, with independent groups and CGI doing something that was needed and creating. I guess our summer camp is probably different than any other summer camp out there. And I'll in a future episode I'll give you some pictures and show some things about it as we go. But right now, just leave it at that.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So how things been going with you?
Things are okay. My daughter started some college classes this summer, so she's begun her college experience, and hopefully she'll do a year in community to make sure that that's the major she wants to do, and then we'll move her off to another college after that.
All right, let's go ahead and bring in our guest today, and a great guest we have as always, Mr. AJ Sanchez. How you doing, AJ?
Great guest. It's stepping it up. First, I was a special guest, and now I'm the
Yes.
great
Now you're
guest.
a great guest. Yeah, because the last episode we had with you, we went over the location of Sinai, and that was very interesting and informative. It was a lot of stuff that I'd never heard before, which was really good stuff. So we're
Yeah,
looking
we
forward
had
to
some
what you
good
have today.
feedback for that program, so we thank you again for that.
Yes, appreciate
And
all the
that's a
research.
lot of the issues here. Is a lot of the things people haven't heard, and the question is, well, why? It's almost like our academics and our history professors aren't telling us everything. So, I have a guest with me right now as well. My daughter Esther is here, and she got a boo boo, and her dad feels like a total jerk because he wasn't watching her, and she climbed on the couch and she fell down. But I learned a secret about parenting. It doesn't matter what happens if you feed her enough watermelon; all their problems go away. So mass quantities of watermelon is the key to good parenting.
Great to see Esther.
Yeah, she got a little boo boo, and she got a strawberry, and I'm gonna feel bad until he goes away. Okay. But I've learned my lesson. All right, I'm gonna keep a better eye on her.
Hey, it's all about learning, man.
All right.
But yeah, I'd love to talk today, and the topic I'd like to introduce is what happened to the lost 10 tribes? Are they lost? Did they?
Right.
What happened after they were conquered by the Assyrians?
Yeah, if you go on YouTube or something, you'll find so many different ideas of what happened to them. There's so many ideas out there.
Agreed, but most of your established papers, documents, encyclopedias, Wikipedia, they'll all tell you that they're going to tell you that we're very small in numbers. Northern Israel was very small in numbers. B, they got decimated by the Assyrians, and whoever was left just got assimilated in with everybody else. But as I'm going to show, the records don't show that. The records show
Okay.
that quite a few Israelites, not just a half a dozen,
Right.
and they got taken into captivity, not destroyed. But if we do a quick overview for those who aren't aware of the situation, I can kind of go through some of the uh, beginnings of what led up
Right.
to it. So, as most Bible students know, the um, 12 tribes of Israel were made up of the 12 sons of Israel. And when Moses, or I guess it would be Joshua, entered into the land, he divided up the area according to the 12 tribes. And at that time, they had a united kingdom under David and Solomon, and you could say under Saul as well. But then around 920 BC, as we know from scripture, King Rehoboam had an awesome idea. You know, the nation of Israel that was struggling with the tax burden of Solomon asked Rehoboam for tax relief, and instead he decided to raise taxes beyond anything that was done before. And for some strange and unknown reason, there was a civil war, and the nation split into two nations. And
Mm-hmm.
so instead of having a single nation of Israel, you now have two kingdoms, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And it stayed that way for a couple hundred years. And then around 790 BC, Israel fell under tax tribute to the ever expanding Assyrian Empire.
Mm-hmm.
The Assyrian Empire had continued to grow, and you can see over here, I'm going to pull a full screen. It didn't happen all at once. They slowly started to grow, and they slowly started to expand their territory to the point where they were taking up Syria and Lebanon, and then finally they ended up taking in Israel itself. And so that's the situation that we see. And so
Yeah, and
Israel,
this was prophesied, was it not, for this
yes,
to
it
happen to
was.
Israel?
It was prophesied. Yes, it was, because of what Solomon had done.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then at about I think it was a few years afterwards. Let's just say 750-ish BC. The northern tribes of Israel decided to get into a military alliance with Syria and Lebanon. And their attempted coup went sideways on them, of course, as we know from history. And the Assyrian king Tiglath-Pileser, he put down the rebellion, and then he began deporting the Israelites. And the Assyrians had a policy of giving you a first chance, and then a second chance, and then a third chance. And so by the time this final rebellion took place, they were at their last chance. They'd been conquered, they had their government removed, and then they were finally rebelled again, and then they got deported. And so that's the process. But see, the Assyrians weren't doing this for no reason. They were very practical people. And one of the reasons they did it was because as their empire expanded, okay, that old fort that they built like last year that's sitting at this one location, well, the border just moved forward like 50 miles. And so that old fort that was there on the edge of the border is now worthless. So now they have to build a new fort, and they have to garrison it with new troops. And then when the border moves forward a little bit more, they have to build another fortress. And this is a problem as you're expanding your empire, is how do you maintain the new territory and control the new territory that you just took? And so what they did was they just raised the taxes through the roof. I mean, they made it like practically unbearable, ridiculous taxes. And then the first country within their interior that didn't pay their taxes, they got deported and sent to the front. They got sent to this disputed territory where there's all these border raiders going on. And so people didn't want to move there. They were being forced to move there. And they actually had a very concerted effort to get as many Israelites there as possible. And there's a great article by the um, by Biblical Archaeology Review. It's by K. Lawson Younger, and this is all based off of Assyrian tablets that he found. And he talks about this deportation. Now, the Assyrians were very brutal in their conquest. They've got all these, they call them not inscriptions, but they're reliefs of just grotesque things that they were doing to the people they captured. But in reality, it was only a very few. Rather than kill a whole bunch of people, they decided, well, we're just going to take the elite, like 0.5% of the country, and we're just going to do some gruesome things to them to scare everybody else into not wanting to do what just happened to that other guy. But the vast majority of the people did not get killed. And when they were transported there, this was not a death march. There's a lot of cuneiform records that they found in these Assyrian libraries that talks about how they were trying to get as many people there alive and in good shape. There was one Assyrian captain that talked about how his captives fell sick, and so he was told by a superior commander to wait there in this location where there's food until everybody got well and then transport them. There was another letter that talked about how this one captain didn't have enough food, he thought, to make it to the trip to go up there to where they're being deported. And so he gave some of his captives to another commander so they could both make it and get all the captives there alive. And then there's another letter that was scolding a younger captain or inexperienced and basically saying, listen, you're responsible to get everybody there alive. If you don't, you're in trouble. And so the bottom line is this wasn't a death march. This wasn't a, like the Bantam Death March or what the Nazis did. I mean, they only got like maybe 10% of the people from Eastern Europe that they captured to take them back to Germany as slaves. There was only 10% that made it back. Well, this was not what the Assyrians were doing. They were trying to get as many people there as possible. And that's what K. Lawson Younger has found in all of these records that he has. So another interesting thing is they were sent to the place exactly where Scripture says they were sent. There's a lot of historians that say, well, we don't know where they went, or they could have gone anywhere. Well, that's not the case. Once again, K. Lawson Younger and other Assyriologists have found all these cuneiform tablets, and they've found that they were sent exactly where Scripture says. And here it is over in 2 Kings 17, and it says clearly, in the 9th year of Hosea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried them away to Assyria, and he placed them in Halah and Habor by the river Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. And if you look on a map, you can see where these two locations are. Right. Once again, we're looking at this. The cities of the Medes would be over here in this area. I don't know if you can see. Let me try a different view on this.
All right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So just to help people out who aren't familiar with this map, on the left side of the map is over where Israel would be, right?
Yeah, Israel's right down here.
Yeah.
You can see in this area here.
Okay.
And the two locations that they were sent is right up here by these rivers, the Gozan River, Halah and Habor on the Gozan River. So they're right up in this area, right in here. And then over here to be realistic, it was next to the cities of the Medes is where they were sent, which is kind of tomato.
A question, AJ. So, some people would wonder, like, why would they put some here and some there? There was some thinking on the Assyrians' part to try to keep these people dispersed so they could control them. Is that your take on it?
No, not really. I think it was for military advantages. They wanted to be able to push. They were having problems. And if you look back here on the map, there was oops, go back over. They were trying to push forward in this territory. They were trying to push out whoever was here.
Right.
And over here in this area on Lake Mead, they were trying, or Lake Irma, they were trying to push out the Urartu. That was their main. I know over here they were trying to push the Urartu. They put the Israelites here, and they moved forward up, and they had a battle of Gamir, which was up in this location, to try and push back the Urartu. So once again, they're expanding their empire, and they're putting people from the interior to the exterior of the empire to hold those positions. And then as they gain more territory, they have those peoples move forward. It's like a mobile fortress. And that's what they were trying to do, basically. That was
question. Did you say they were moving the Israelites there? Were they conscripting them to be part of their army, or are they just moving there just as having people there?
No, it was you hold this place and do what we tell. We're going to kill all of you. That's what it was. Because they'd already quit paying their tribute. They gotten into an agreement, and they said that they were going to pay their taxes, and they didn't. And they gave them a couple chances, and so now the agreement is if you don't do what we tell you to, we're going to kill all of you. And they, like I said, they were very gruesome on a very few select as an example to give them some incentive, and that's pretty much what happened. And one of the big things to keep in mind here, and this article by K. Lawson Younger is awesome. He's got a book on it as well, but the entire narrative in Scripture talking about these events have all been confirmed 100%.
Right.
I want to show you here's an inscription that I want to have you look at. This is one by Tiglath-Pileser. I carried to Assyria the land of Homri, its army and all of its people. They killed Pekah, their king. I installed Hosea as king over them. I received from them 10 talents of gold and talents of silver. So that's what the Assyrian inscription says. Now let's look at Scripture and look what Scripture says about this. Here's what Scripture says. It says, and Hosea, son of Elah, made a plot against Pekah, the son of Remaliah, and he struck him and killed him, and he reigned in place in the 20th year of Jotham of Uzzah. So this matches exactly what Tiglath-Pileser said. They killed Pekah, their king. I installed Hosea. So he had some deal with Hosea. Scripture doesn't talk about it, but we can see it existed. And he paid him the tribute.
And there was a time before they found all these Syrian cuneiform items. Weren't some of the scholars prior to these discoveries poo-pooing this idea of what Assyria did to Israel? Yeah.
They wouldn't even acknowledge that Assyria even existed. It's just biblical folklore and mythology.
Really?
Oh yeah. In the Encyclopedia of Biblical Literature calls them the scattered illusions, is what it refers to the Assyrian people, is the term I think it uses to talk about how.
When was that written? When was that written when they said that?
That was written. It was written pre archaeology, pre Assyrianology, obviously, because they found Nineveh, I believe, in the 1840s, I think. So it's pre-1840s.
Right, gotcha.
But within academia, we have to realize at about the 1830s, definitely by the late 1800s, it was the consensus of pretty much all of academia, and it's been this way ever since, to try, they're atheists, they're against the Bible, to try and disprove Scripture any way you want to. And all of the disciplines of science have fallen under that, whether we're talking about archaeology, biology, psychology, all of it is geared towards atheism, evolution, to try and disprove the Bible. And, archaeology was no different. And that's the overwhelming movement within these disciplines of sciences to try and disprove the Bible. And in this case, they're just flat out lying, because we have tons of Assyrian records that say otherwise. They weren't wiped out by the Assyrians. They were moved there alive and in one piece. And there were, from my estimations, there was at least 1 million, if not upwards to 2 or 3 million people that were transported to these two locations.
Okay.
And we've got, for instance, in the city of Assyria alone, there were, or Samaria, in the city of Samaria alone, there were 3 deportations, and they pulled about 30,000 from each of these deportations. And then there were still people left. They set people there, and he said he imposed the same tribute upon them as the previous king. So if you have a city and the population is getting decreased by 30,000 a hit, and you're still requiring the same tribute, makes me believe there had to be at least a certain number of people there. I mean, their tributes were unreasonable to start out with, but they had to be somewhat realistic, because.
So are you saying so that when the Israelites were transported, there were some that remained, or did they transport all of them?
No, there were some that remained after this last letter. We have a letter from Sargon from about 720 BC, and he states in this letter, in this one deportation alone, he took 30,000, and that was the third deportation. So there's already 2 before then of about 30,000. And then there was enough people still left in the city. But eventually they took everybody. They took everybody. They wanted them out there on the front to hold the line, is where they wanted them. And so, and there's several inscriptions. Well, here's the inscription right here. I can show you real quick. I besieged and reconquered Samaria. I took 27,000 people who lived there. I gathered 50 chariots. I taught the rest their skills. I set my eunuch over them. I imposed on them the same tribute as the previous king, which was Shalmaneser the fifth. And so, once again, there had to be enough people still there to pay for the tribute. And this is the third deportation. So, I mean, the city of Samaria alone could have had 150, 200,000 people in that city at the time.
Okay.
Did the Assyrians take any of their other conquered people at this time and put them into where Israel was? Did they do any of that type of thing that you saw?
They did deport the Lebanese. I remember that one, but I don't know where they sent them.
Gotcha.
Okay. I don't know from.
So in other words, who took the place of the Israelites in those lands when they left?
Well, according to Scripture, it was the Chaldeans. He had moved them over there. They weren't paying their taxes apparently, and they swapped them over to that location.
Okay.
So
I think that's what some of these ancient states would. When they took people away, sometimes they would put other people there just to make sure that if there was anybody left, by mixing up these populations, it would cause issues for any rebellion that might come back or try to start.
But it was by no means as many people as they took out. They just wanted to hold it there so we didn't have a void, a vacuum. In the center of their empire to maintain things. But the bottom line is Scripture and Assyrian records match that the people were taken to Halah and Habor on the Gozan River, and that's what K. Lawson Younger says here in this article. He states the Assyrian records confirm that the Israelites were taken to the same locations that the Bible identifies, Halah and Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. And so that's where they were set. Now, here's where the big thing happens is, what happened from there? Where did they go? I mean, did they just disappear off the face of the planet? Did aliens abduct them? What happened?
Right.
Well, if you go back to the map that I had there before, let me pull this up real quick. It's interesting that in these two locations, Halan Habor and the city of Goman, there were two groups of people that appeared out of nowhere at the exact same time. The Cimmerians right here and the Scythians. Remember, the Israelites were originally sent over into, the one group was sent here, and then the other group was sent over up in here.
Okay.
And then at the same time, and in practically the same locations, you have these two groups of people that just appeared out of nowhere. And
when you say appeared out of nowhere, what do you mean by that? That there was no records before of them in history?
There is no archaeological evidence, period, that shows that they existed prior to 700 BC. They have no, and they're known for their very extensive burial mounds, and that's where they get the bulk of their archaeological evidence from, is from these burial mounds. And they have
question. So the burial mounds very different than what Israelite culture would do, though?
I don't know. I haven't looked into that much. I don't know if the burial mounds were a product of them getting moved out, because they're vagabonds and they don't know where to leave their stuff when they die, whereas before they had an inheritance in the land. So it could have been a product. But the Cimmerians and the Scythians both, and that's kind of interesting. If they were deported at the same time, they both were known for these burial mounds. And I could quote you a ton of archaeologists. I don't know how many you want. I got here Jan Barnett, Renette Rolls, Tamara C. Rice from her book Scythians and Scythians, Sharon Turner, Angus Sutherland. I got a ton of quotes here. You tell me which one you want, where they will all admit that they have no archaeological record of the Scythians or the Cimmerians existing prior to the 7th century. And they show up.
They do have the burial mounds after that. That's their main. Is that the main thing that they have archaeologically for them?
Right, is their burial mounds, and they have no evidence that they existed prior to 7th or 8th century BC. They just
is there anything in the burial mounds that would indicate that they were from Israel?
They haven't found anything. By the time that they, most of their stuff is bones, and there may be a few swords. They have a few gold inscriptions or figurines that they found, but there's no writing on them. All they know from them is they had a lot of hair, and they had full beards, and they rode horses, and they shot bows from their horses. In the Eurasian steppe, that's where they basically lived on horseback.
Yeah, I looked into them a little bit, and again, you know more about it than I do because you've studied this more. So my question is, some people are saying that they spoke a type of Iranian language. Is that why would they say that they spoke an Iranian language if they were from Israel?
Well, Iranian is a Semitic language as well. Okay, and it's a cousin to Chaldean, or excuse me, what's the Arabic. It's a cousin to Arabic, and it's a cousin to Hebrew.
But so why would their language change so quickly from the time they were in Israel to theirs? Is that
why did it what?
Why would their language change so quickly from the time they were in Israel to the time they were there to a different language?
I don't know that it
change.
I don't know that it did.
Okay.
I can get into the linguistic arguments. I was going to do that a little bit later, but
I'm just curious.
But there is archaeological evidence that can connect the Scythians and the Cimmerians to the Israelites. And it comes from a couple of inscriptions. The one inscription that we're going to bring up here is the Behistine rock, or the Behistine inscription. And it is it's a huge inscription. It's on a rock face in Iran. And it's a trilingual inscription. You can see that this is all cuneiform stamping in here on the inscription. And it was made by Darius the Mede. And he's bragging about all of his conquests and all the areas that he's conquered. And then he lists, and it's a trilingual inscription. It's written in Old Persian, Median, and Babylonian. And it lists 23 provinces that are subject to him.
Right.
And one provenance it calls as Scythia, and the other one it calls it the Saka, which is well, it uses the term Saka. And then the other language, it refers to them as the Gimri or the Kimri. It depends on how you
Okay.
pronounce it. It's like a hard G, Kimri or Himri.
Hmm.
Um, well, that's the exact same word that we just read from that Assyrian tablet on what Sargon called the Israelites. And
AJ, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just a little context for people out there who are not familiar with what you're talking about. When Darius the Mede comes along, the Assyrians have now kind of petered out. The Babylonians took over, and then the Medes and the Persians took over. Is what you're talking about now at that particular time?
right, this is several
Okay.
hundred.
Okay. So just wanted to give a little context to people out there because we kind of jumped. And maybe if you can give a little bit of a timeline there of when Assyria was most powerful, then the Babylonians, and then when this inscription was put up. I think that'd be important for people who aren't familiar.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So the Assyrians were in their height at around the 7th century BC, and then as we know, the Babylonians were taken over
Hmm.
around the 6th century BC. So about 100 years later, the Assyrian Empire had collapsed mainly due to famine. God predicted it in
Right.
Scripture. Um, they collapsed due to a famine, pretty much, and then the Babylonians took over. And as we also know from the book of Daniel, the Persians later conquered the Babylonians. Cyrus the Great did in 520 BC,
Hmm.
20-ish BC, and that was by Cyrus the Great. And so then later, at the height of its empire was Darius the Great, or Darius the Mede, and he's the one who's responsible for this inscription. But the important thing that I'm bringing up is he's using the same term, the same word to describe the Cimmerians and the Scythians, which he's referring to as the same people, because
Hmm.
he's talking to them in two different languages and referring to them as the same people. And then secondarily, he's also referring to them using the word the Assyrians called the Israelites.
Gotcha.
And
And
so that's
I think that's a significant point that you're making,
Hmm.
that there is some historical information that makes a linkage between Israel and these people that you're
Hmm.
talking. There's his history to that.
Right.
Now, again, I'm not going to get into the whole discussion right now, but I just want to make sure everybody gets that point.
Okay.
Yeah, and then another big confirmation to this is the black obelisk. This is an Assyrian obelisk.
Hmm.
Um, it is made of black limestone, and you can see here in one of these inscriptions, you've got this guy here that's bowing down to the king here. That's a bad version of it. Here's a better resolution. Here's the king of Assyria. There's
Hmm.
his little winged god with the uh, swastika in the center, like they like. And then there's Jehu, and here in this inscription in the bottom, it says, um, Iala Kumri, or Jehu, the house of Omri. So, as we know from scripture, Omri was one of the kings of Israel, and the Assyrians were very impressed by him because they were defeated by him in battle. And so they always referred to the Israelites as the house of Omri, kind of like Israel or Judah was always referred to by its the outsiders as the house of David. And we
Hmm.
found the one of the steels that they had found refers to Judah, the kingdom of Judah, as the house of David. Israel was referred to as the house of Omri, and that's where you get this name Kumri or Humri, depending on how you want to say it, is from this term that the Assyrians used. And this connection is not lost by anyone. There are archaeologists who aren't atheists that that can confirm this, and one of these is Sir Henry Ralston. He's considered the father of Assyriology, and he says this: we have reasonable grounds for regarding the Gimri or the Cimmerians, who first appeared on the confines of Assyria and Media in the 7th century BC, and the sockeye of the Behistine Rock nearly 2 centuries later, identical with Bet Kumri or Kimri of Samaria, or the 10 tribes of the house of Israel. So, I'm not the only one that has made this connection, and they had in the past. It's only recently, due to atheism in our universities, where they've tried to destroy this evidence, bury it the best they can. And so,
I have a question. Just to see if you have some people. Again, you talk about the atheists and the people who look at stuff. Well, people have they've looked at these burial mounds and they've done DNA analysis of the peoples who lived there, who were, I guess, Scythians, and they say that the DNA doesn't match the DNA of people who were from Judah.
okay,
You have a response to that?
I'd love to answer that question.
Give a response to that.
So the way they do DNA tracking is that they look at what they're called SNPs, and I can't remember what it's a long genetic word for SNP, and it's basically a variant, a mutation, because everybody's DNA is almost the same.
Haplograph? Right? Does that sound familiar?
I think it's a SNP is what it's called.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I think it's called a SNP. Anyway, it's just a mutation, and that's how they because we all have these little genetic mistakes where they're encoding DNA and a mistake happens, and that's how they can trace people, is by these little mistakes.
Right.
And so they identify these certain SNPs with certain groups of people. Well, the further back they go, it's harder to trace them. It gets very hard to trace them. In the early stages, where you've got 20 people that are all a relative of this one guy, and he was a Jew, and so then we can identify him with that SNP, and anybody who has it is a descendant to his. And so they find this one SNP and they can identify it. Well, they're having problems going back further than the Middle Ages as far as finding and identifying SNPs that are area. And the other thing is the researcher himself, he's the one who locates and finds the SNP that he's using to identify it with, right? So he's got a little bit of artistic license. If he doesn't want to find a connection, he doesn't have to find one, And so there's that as well. And then the other issue is the further back you go, the less differences, the less mutations you're going to have as you're going back to 2nd century. And one thing, for instance, like with you, Mike or Jeff, you're not going to have any SNPs that differentiate you from your brother. There is going to be none. They only happen every few generations. Not every 3rd generation you have one. And so if you've got 12 sons of Israel and you can't identify a SNP of what makes them common, the 12 sons aren't going to have any SNPs that are going to differentiate them. Their DNA, you're not going to be able to trace. You cannot trace your brother. Now, you can trace it back to your uncle or your great grandpa and then find out who has that one. There's that. But it's going to get mixed around. And so it's not that easy. And unless you want, it's like any other thing in science. If you want to believe it, you'll find something that makes you believe it. And if you want to ignore something, you can ignore it. And that's unfortunately the room we're in, is they're just dishonest. They're just very dishonest. So you can, bottom line is you can read whatever you want to into genetic testing, and you can exclude whatever you want to in genetics.
Yeah, I guess that also goes to genetic testing, because if we get to the end of this, if we say the peoples of United States and Britain are like Israel, they say the genetic testing doesn't show a there's no connection between, I guess, modern Jews today. Would that be your same argument for that?
Well, they would have to have. Well, the question is, when were they convened? When were they merged? When were they at the same? Well, you're talking about Jacob. That's when their DNA were together, as Jacob. So if Jacob didn't have an identifiable SNP that they can find and they want to acknowledge, you got that. If he didn't have it and they can't locate it, they ain't going to be able to connect them. So
yeah, I that question came up in the research that I was doing, and there's a popular book that was written about 15, 20, 30 years ago, around the year 2000, that was pushing this idea that the Israelites were not who we think they were because we couldn't find these genetic markers. But if you read the book, the point the writer was making was only the Jews, because they've stayed together as a group throughout history, the Kohanim, the priestly caste within Judaism, only the tribe of Judah, that we can find some signifiers within their DNA that can go back. But the reason for that is because they stayed together because of their persecution for all these years.
And you could identify them.
That identifies them. But the Israelites, because they were dispersed beginning in the 700s BC, there is no group of them that you can say stayed, I'll use the word pure, through all these ages like the Jews more so did, that the DNA argument, you got to put that aside because of how DNA works. And there are a couple good books on this. I read a couple when I was doing this research, but it's a great question, Jeff.
I was saying that because, again, like with intermarriage, because I would say, like you say, I guess the premise is the Scythians were the Israelites. Do you think that they eventually migrate to like Europe? Do they intermix with the people who are already in Europe at the time as well, as they're migrating? Is that something that would do that to the genetics?
Well, I don't know that there were a lot of people in the area when they moved up there.
Okay.
There's indications from scripture in the book of Judges that, remember when Deborah was writing the Song of Deborah, she scolded the tribe of Dan because they were off in their ships. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, they weren't in the promised land for 50 years, and the tribe of Dan is already off on expeditions. Okay. So one of the things that they're going to come up is they found archaeological evidence of the Irish Gaelic people in Ireland that goes back 2,000 years, 3,000 years, right? Well, that's because the tribe of Dan was out there on those ships, and they were partnering with the Phoenicians people quite a bit.
So you said the people from Dan got there independently of, say, the Scythians, is what you're saying?
Yeah. Well, one thing that we're going to see is that they knew that their countrymen were there already. And so when they got deported to the area between the Black and the Caspian Seas, Armenia or Iberia, or whatever term you want to use, as soon as the Assyrians fell, they were hightailing it up there to the Western Europe because they had countrymen that were already there, and they had heard stories back and forth.
Okay.
And there's a lot of maps to prove this. Here, I'll show you a couple maps that show.
Just to that point. Again, in my research, one thing that surprised me was, we usually have this idea of Israel and Judah, but what we forget is the tribes of Israel were separate entities, and that blessing went on to Ephraim and Manasseh. It wasn't just focused on Israel proper. It was focused into those two sons, which is interesting when you start to look at things prophetically. But I would argue that over those hundreds of years of being deported to Assyria first, you're going to mix with somebody there at some point, and as you move over hundreds and hundreds of years to other locations, I would argue that there was some mixing going on, but that doesn't take away from this group of people that was in some way cohesive, that kind of moved up into Northwest Europe. I would just say that, there was some mixing. There was some mixing with Israel, with the Egyptians, and others. So
Yeah, and the
But I
fact
think,
that there
I
was
think that's an
mixing doesn't
important point.
exclude that these prophecies happen the way that God said they would happen.
Okay.
And I think that's an important point when we look at a lot of the argument against this theory today is how it was pushed from a racial perspective. And again, you can go back to Egypt and Moses and see that there was mixing there. In Jesus's lineage there's mixing, and that gets to the whole idea of God using a nation to do his will or his bidding. Again, that's another angle of this whole discussion. We're not going to finish today. We'll bring you back. But it's an interesting discussion because all the things that come off of this, it's wow. I'm sorry, AJ, you continue.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask that question because again, I know you and Mike have studied this. This is something I have not studied, so I have to say, hey, I've not studied this in detail. So I have questions, and I think maybe you can provide answers to some of these questions.
Yeah, and I would say everybody can bring up valid questions, and you're not going to find necessarily that many smoking guns. There's a couple smoking guns, but you see this preponderance of evidence, and as you see more and more evidence come forward, you can't discount all of them because you haven't found a genetic marker by biased, biologists who want to prove the Bible wrong.
Right.
I appreciate your statement. I appreciate your statement about smoking guns because some people talk about this subject like it's doctrine and you got to believe this, where there's doctrine and then there's prophetic scenarios and possibilities in prophetic scenarios based on indications in scripture. And I think we need to keep an open mind and not lose sight of these possibilities because, hey, if things go down 200 years from now that have something to do with this, have we lost that knowledge and we aren't able to wake people up at that particular time because we've lost this background knowledge that we have right now? That's why I think this is an important thing to keep in conversation.
Yeah.
Well, it says Israel, when they are conquered, and they will be, you're talking about Jeremiah or Ezekiel or Isaiah, says, when they go into captivity at the time of the end, the time of Jacob's trouble, the house of Israel and the house of Judah, they will know that they were punished for their iniquities, and they're going to know that they are Israel. And so I feel strongly that this warning message is going to be preached to the modern descendants of Israel at the time of the end, because when they do go into captivity, then they'll wake up and realize what happened, and they will acknowledge it.
I guess it wouldn't be fair if you didn't know you were Israel and someone didn't tell you that, right?
Exactly. And that's in Hosea, and I think it's also brought up over in Nahum, maybe. But
gotcha.
Let me show you some of these maps. These maps are awesome. They're very beautiful. There's a cool project, the David Rumsey project, and he's got these beautiful maps. I got one of them on my wall because they're so well done. But
how long have you been doing this specific research, AJ? Like just
it's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while. I'm not a fanatic or anything. Don't get me wrong. Right. But anyway, here's a map, and this is from the Roman Empire. It was actually produced in 1570, but it's depicting the Roman Empire. And if you look over here in the side comments, it says the Kimri are the same, or the Cimmerians, excuse me, the Cimmerians are the same as the Cimbri. Okay.
What year? Do you have a date on this map, AJ? Any idea?
Oh yeah. It is 1623. This is from 1623. Anyway,
so that's what that translates to be. That the Kimri are the same as the Cimbri.
The Cimmerians are the same as the Cimbri. And
now help me understand something, AJ. You said this was a Roman map, but you said the date is 1623. So help me understand.
It's a Dutch map.
Okay.
The Dutch were famous for their maps, and this is a map of the Roman Empire. I can't remember what year it's depicting, but it's a map of the Roman Empire that was produced. This was actually produced in 1623.
Okay, so
Okay, is this language
somebody.
Dutch? Is this language Dutch right here?
No, this is all Latin. They made
Latin. Gotcha.
all the good maps were made in Latin, and they did
Gotcha.
that up until almost the 20th century. They made all the maps in Latin.
So just to answer a question for me, so somebody who was Dutch in the 1600s had access to old Roman maps, and they reproduced this. Is that the correct? Okay,
correct.
Got it.
All right.
Okay. I'm just trying to bridge that gap between the Roman Empire to 1600s. Okay.
Right.
Yep. And there's a ton of encyclopedias that make that connection between the Cimbri and the Cimmerians,
Right.
and the Celts. And so here's another map. This map is from 1812. It's also a map of the Roman Empire. And here you see the Cimbri or the Cimmerians with the Angles, the Saxons, and the Cossi, the Caucasians. The Caucasians came from the Caucasian Mountains, which are once again between that area, between the Black and the Caspian Sea. So once again, the group of people that we're tracing them with is the Cimmerians or the Cimbri, which is the same word phonetically, that on the Behistine Rock and on the Black Obelisk, because that's what the Assyrians called the Israelites, was the Cimbri or the Gimri. Okay,
Gotcha.
So there's that map. Okay, here's another map from this is from 1827, and up here you've got the Cimbri right there, the Cimbri with the Saxons and the Angli and the Caucasians all in this same area.
So you're mentioning the Saxons now, AJ. So again, we were starting with the Cimbri and the Scythians. So what's your take on the Angles and the Saxons who also came into this part of the world? Were they peoples are you saying that they were in Eastern Europe at one time? What's your thought on connections between the Anglo-Saxons and Cimbri?
In 500 AD, all these people here invaded Great Britain.
Okay.
And there's a book called The Book on the Taking of Britain. It's called The Brute is the word it's used. It's called The Brute. And it talks about this invasion from these people in northern Germany that moved into Britain. And all these people, the Cimbri, the Saxons, and the Cossi, we know are all now, the Caucasians are all now in Britain. And this migration took place at around 500 AD. And there's various historians that have talked about it from the time that it happened, where they've written this stuff down. But the point that we're getting at is, the Cossi and the Saxons, well, that's a word that Darius the Mede used to refer, the Sakai and the Saxons.
Okay.
Same, very similar. So that's the same word that Darius the Mede used to refer to the Saxons, and he also referred to them as the Cimbri. So two of the three languages he's referring to them here in Northern Europe.
So what time period? If we have like the Scythians, Cimmerians, what time period were they did they get to, I guess, the British Isles, or did they get to Europe and stuff? What time period are we looking for? Are we looking pre-Christ or after Christ? What time period?
It was after. It was, I think. Well, there were some of them that went immediately, like the Irish, the Danites. They went immediately.
So didn't Josephus mention he knew where the tribes of Israel were located, and that was not England, right? That was more like Iraq, Iran.
Right. So this is what Josephus says here.
Okay.
Wherefore there are but just two tribes in Asia. Okay. So we're talking Middle East. Okay. And Europe subject to the Romans, while the 10 tribes are beyond the Euphrates and are in an immense multitude. So he's talking about the Eurasian steppe, Ukraine. Right. And that's where we know the Saxons or the Scythians and the Cimmerians hung out in that area, just outside of the Roman Empire.
Are Russians, Ukrainians, are they maybe from these groups as well?
No,
No.
they're from further east,
Okay.
Gog and Magog, but they held that territory until um, a lot of people believe that there was a mini ice age that took place
Hmm.
during that period of time. The planet, despite what some people might tell you, have normal warming and cooling cycles, and it got a little bit colder, and they just couldn't grow enough grass to sustain themselves. And the Roman Empire was on the decline, and so that's when they started moving in there to northern um, Germany to kind of stay out of that area during that period of time. So it was a migration. It was a period. It didn't happen all at once. The Scots, they took a completely different route. So a very interesting document is called the Declaration of Arrowbroth of 1320, and when Robert the Bruce, he defeated what was it the Longshanks. He defeated the Longshanks, and he's sending a letter to the Pope to try and get recognized. And he's basically saying, we're not just a suburb of London. We settled this territory separately, and we have always been a separate people. And he talks in here, it talks about the route that they took. If you look up this Declaration of Arrowbroth, and they came from Scythia, and he says they went through the Tyrrhenian Sea to Iberia, which now he's talking about the Iberian Peninsula. So we're talking about Spain. And then from there, they went up to Scotland. And so the three locations they went by ship from the Iberia between the Black and the Caspian Seas. And then they went to the Iberia on the Spanish Peninsula. And then they went to the final Iberia, which is over in Scotland, which is on many maps is still referred to as Iberia. So it's very common for peoples to name their location after where they came from. There's a York in England and a New York in New England, and there's
Hmm.
we can see those patterns all over the place. But the three places that the Declaration of Arrowbroth mentions that they went to are all called Iberia, but they went by ship. The Scots went by ship, and it's not. It shouldn't be thought of as a coincidence that there are three places on the planet referred to as Iberia that are called Iberia for no reason. And on this map here is another very interesting map. Let's zoom in here a little bit. And on here it says Hebraei de Insulae. This is actually an S. It's not an F. That's how they made S's back then, fancy S's, lowercase S's. So Hebraei de Insulae. Well, if you go to your Google Translate, right, and you type in Hebraei, it means Hebrews right there.
So when was that map? When does that map come from? What year?
I think it's 1570. Yeah, 1570.
And
Another
who put
Dutch
that
map.
together? Who put a Dutch map? Okay.
It's another Dutch map. It's written in Latin, and this says Island of the Hebrews. That's what this says in Latin. So why would this map have written on there Island of the Hebrews if it wasn't some Hebrews there? Explain that one to me. And then in this down here it says Ireland or part of Iberia. Okay. Once again, Ireland is being called Iberia. Well, that's the three places that are referred to as Iberia is Scotland and Ireland, the Spanish Peninsula, and the place between the Black and the Caspian Seas next to the Caucasian Mountains in the area of Armenia. And there's a ton of maps that show, let me show on here, other maps that refer to Scotland and Ireland as Iberia. In here, this is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. a document that was written around 1200 AD, I believe, and in it it says that the Saxons came from Armenia. Right here, if you look in real phone, this is actually Armenia right here in Latin. Once again, it's in Latin. And once
Right.
again, that's that same area between the Black and the Caspian Seas where we know that the Scythians and the Cimmerians settled in.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like 10 more documents here I could go for, ancient documents that refer to the Scythians and the Cimmerians in the same location that all of northwestern Europe says they came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what's important to recognize, like I worked at the Central Intelligence Agency and we gathered data about different issues. Mm-hmm. You're never going to have all the information you want. Okay. Right. You never have all your information. So there's always holes in information. But I think when you look at this subject, it's intriguing that there is a lot of information that makes you scratch your head. And
yeah, again, definitely.
There's definitely holes in it.
Yeah, definitely for me, like for me, that one Island of the Hebrews like makes me, like that's very interesting. Why would they write that?
But listen, AJ, we're going to bring you back for this subject because we haven't really scratched the surface. But you got about 8 minutes left. Figure out what you want to do to kind of end in about 8 minutes so we can pick it up next time.
Okay. I won't go with any more of the archaeological historical evidence because I could just keep going on that. But I want to talk real quick why this is important. Okay. Why do I care? Okay. Well, two real reasons why you should care is one is all the promises that were given to Abraham were not fulfilled by the modern nation of Judah and Israel, the modern nation of Israel. Okay. They just weren't fulfilled. He says, you will make your descendants as the sand on the seashore. You shall possess the gates of your enemy. That is not the Jews. Okay. Sorry.
So let me throw this at you, AJ, because as I was doing the research, I got some of the critical side of this, and so some people argue, well, wait a minute, they controlled the land of Canaan, and all the Canaanites, for that land, they had total control of Canaan at least, and that was the gates of their enemies on a small scale, some people argue. So again, I'm with you, but how would you respond to those who say, and there are a couple scriptures in the Old Testament, like where it says, that they are a plentiful, but then you have a scripture in Hosea, like Hosea 1:10, that's talking about the future and saying Israel's going to be as the sand of the sea. And Israel's already gone in history when Hosea is writing. So he's got to be talking about a future. But what you've probably seen those scriptures I'm referring to in the Old Testament that seem to, for some people, answer that, oh, well, it's confirmed in this, it's confirmed in that to some degree. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, but there's some scriptures that you can't say that with, like where it says, a nation and a company of nations shall proceed from you.
Right.
You could argue. I mean, hey, about a company of nations, people have argued. They say, well, isn't the tribes a company of nations? That's the argument I've heard. That the tribes were the company of nations.
Well, no, because so Jacob is talking to his sons. He's talking to Joseph, and he says, Genesis 48:19, I know my son, he shall become a people. He's talking about Manasseh, and he also shall be great, but his younger brother, Ephraim, shall be greater than him, and his descendants shall be a multitude of nations. So tell me where the tribe of Ephraim became a multitude of nations. You can't say that.
And that is what he's reading there, Jeff, is from I believe Genesis 49, right?
Right.
Okay, and now people argue about when he says in the last days, but I did some research on that phrase last days, because some people say that means latter days, so that could be sometime in Israel's early history, but that doesn't make sense. when you get what AJ just said, but also for Judah, it said that Shiloh is going to come and take the scepter from somebody in Judah. Mm-hmm. And we know that, wait a minute, Judah stopped in the 580s BC with a known king. Right. And then it's 500 years later. If you want to argue that it's Jesus Christ's first coming, you got to say this: Jesus Christ didn't take over the scepter when he came. No, he didn't come to rule. He's coming to rule when he comes again. So there's some interesting things here you get into this discussion about when you look at this stuff. You know? Yeah. But I'm sorry, AJ, finish up your point.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, and there's a bunch of more scriptures that, if you're looking for the loose brick, you can find it. But if you're looking for the conclusive passages, and one of them is in Deuteronomy 33 that says, Ephraim and Manasseh shall push their peoples to the ends of the earth. They're going to push their enemies to the ends of the earth. And so there's no empire on the planet that has ever pushed their enemies to the ends of the earth other than the British Royal Navy and the American military. I mean, we can go anywhere on the planet and put the hurt on anybody. Okay.
Yeah. So that's not happen. Yeah, right. And so I've read the critics on that verse, and they will argue, well, Israel pushed the Canaanites out. And I get why they're saying that, but it says the ends of the earth. So again, is it hyperbole, or are we being literal here?
Right. And so if you want to make it into an analogy, you can get rid of whatever you want to. It just depends on how far you want to go.
Sure. Yeah. And so that,
or Mike, is it a duality? Is it something that happened then and happens later?
Yeah. So that's AJ. What do you think of that principle of duality in prophecy, where there's an example in the Old Testament, whether it's Adam or Moses or Elijah, who are types of Jesus Christ. When you look at that nationally, also that ancient Israel, there's going to be some type of ancient Israel right before Jesus comes again, and some type of ancient Judah. And again, the nation of Israel today is a good candidate, because we can say most of the tribe of Judah has stayed together in some degree, more so than any other people in history. That's a fact of history.
Yeah.
Well, there are also as many Jews in America as there are in Israel, pretty much.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's the thing to know as well.
You got to be careful when you're using the type and anti-type, because a type just means an example of it. Like the first destruction of Jerusalem was a type in Matthew 24 of the end times. Some of the prophecies were fulfilled. It sort of fits. It's an example that we can use to clarify the future end time events, but by no means did it fully complete the prophecy. And you can make the example it didn't fill it. So there could be analogies or could be similarities between other things. But when you look at all of the specifics and you add them up, these had not been fulfilled by ancient Israel. There might have been some similarities, but the overall aspect of, they're going to push their enemies to the ends of the earth, control the gates of their enemy. They're going to spread abroad to the east, the north, the south, and the west. All nations through you are going to be blessed. You can't say that about ancient Israel.
Great point, AJ. And one other thing is that according to the scholars, the Abrahamic covenant was unconditional, meaning that even though Israel messed up and God did destroy them and did destroy Judah because they were not following God, that was under the Mosaic covenant why he brought them down. But the Abrahamic promises that were made about pushing to the ends of the earth, about being great and as the sands of the sea, nations coming out of you, that was under the Abrahamic covenant. And that's a whole other discussion that relates to this.
Okay. All right, so much to cover, I guess, but we actually have run out of time, AJ. So, are you willing to come back and discuss this some more, or do you think we've covered it?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I would like to show more of the historical aspects, and then show how in my opinion, you cannot understand end time Bible prophecy if you can't identify who the modern nations of Israel is. There's too much end time Bible prophecy that specifically relates to, especially the 3.5 year to the 7 year period of time, that you're not going to understand. You're not going to be ready, and you're not going to be know when to go if you're not watching what's happening to the modern nations of Israel. So we can talk
That sounds
about that.
interesting. Interesting thing to look into. So yeah, we're going to bring you back, AJ. I'm going to get you a date a couple months down the road, and I really appreciate your time today. It's an
Yeah.
interesting subject to talk about.
Again, yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for all the interesting information that you shared with us today. And we look forward to seeing you again. And for everybody who's watching today, thank you for joining us as well today with this program. And we look forward to seeing you next week on another edition of Prove All Things. So we'll say goodbye to everyone and see you again next week.